If you're hearing this, it means I didn't make it back this time. Or maybe it means I finally did what I was supposed to do. I'm not sure which version of me you're listening to anymore. I don't know if this voice belongs to the one who survived or the one who finally learned how to stop. I've died before, 3 times officially. The records say I shouldn't be here. The obituaries say I already left. The ground says I was buried. But the worst part isn't dying. The worst part is surviving and realizing someone else took your place. People always ask when it started. They assume it began the night I drowned, or the night the fire took everything, or the night they found the woman with my face locked alone in a room and couldn't explain how she died. But I think it started earlier than that. I think it started the first time someone looked at me like they recognized me, even though we'd never met. I was 21 when a friend laughed one afternoon and told me there were 3 women in town who looked exactly like me. Same height, same hair, same face. I joked back that maybe I was replaceable. Everyone laughed, but the word stayed with me. Replaceable. Late at night, lying awake in the dark, it didn't feel like a joke. It felt like something I wasn't supposed to notice yet. Like a warning delivered too early. I used to feel watched before I ever knew why. Not followed, not hunted, just observed. As if something was memorizing the way I moved, the way I spoke, the way I existed. The first time I died was by the river. I remember the cold that night. Not the kind that bites your skin, but the kind that settles behind your ribs and makes your breath feel borrowed. I remember walking alone and realizing my footsteps weren't alone with me. There was another rhythm behind mine, perfectly matched. Same pace, same weight. When I stopped, it stopped. When I moved, it followed. I remember turning around and hearing my name spoken in my own voice, soft, familiar, as if it had every right to use it. That's the last thing I remember before the water took me. 6 months later, I woke up in a hospital bed with no memory of how I got there. They said they found me wandering along the highway, barefoot and confused, miles from the river. When I told them my name, the doctor went still. He stared at me like I'd said something impossible. They had buried me. They had already held my funeral. I didn't understand what that meant until I saw it, until I remembered standing at the back of a service, watching my mother cry over a coffin with my name carved into it, watching dirt fall onto a body that wasn't mine. I didn't know whose body it was, only that she wore my face. They told me it was a mistake, a tragic misidentification, that sometimes bodies swell, features distort, records get crossed. They said I was lucky to be alive, but when I asked if she looked like me, no one could lie. Survival didn't feel like luck after that. It felt like theft. The second time I died was in a fire. I had tried to disappear by then. I thought if I stayed hidden, if I stopped being seen, whatever replaced me wouldn't find me again. I stayed in a remote cabin where no one knew my name. The night the fire started, I woke up coughing, smoke filling my lungs. I remember running for the door and seeing someone standing outside, watching the flames climb. Same height, same hair, same posture, still as a reflection. I remember asking her why she looked like me. She didn't answer. They buried her too. Another woman, another coffin, another funeral under my name. Another life ended while mine continued without permission. By the third time, I wasn't afraid of dying anymore. I was afraid of surviving again. That was when I started noticing changes. Not around me, in me. My reflection blinking just a fraction too late. My handwriting shifting between entries in my journal. thoughts appearing on the page that didn't feel like they belonged to the same mind. Sometimes I wanted to live. Sometimes I wanted to disappear. Sometimes I wasn't sure which of us was writing. I started wondering if I was being hunted or if I was the intruder in someone else's life. The third woman died alone in a locked room. No signs of struggle, no explanation, just my face and my name again, printed in headlines like an accusation. That's when the question finally formed fully in my mind. What if I wasn't the original? What if the real Eliza died first? What if I'm the version that wasn't supposed to stay? Once that thought took root, it infected everything. I started seeing women who looked like me everywhere. On missing person websites, in old photographs, in crowds where someone would stand too still, watching, until I blinked and she was gone. I stopped checking reflections because I was afraid one of them wouldn't move when I did. I received a voicemail from my own number telling me I wasn't supposed to still be here. I answered phone calls that used my voice better than I did. I watched surveillance footage of myself entering places I didn't remember visiting, leaving, then entering again minutes later. I couldn't tell which version was me, and that was worse than not knowing if I'd survive. There were nights I dreamed of funerals where I stood at the back of the room, staring into a coffin that held my face. In those dreams, the woman inside always opened her eyes and told me it was my turn. Eventually, fear gave way to responsibility. I stopped running. I stopped hiding. I stopped pretending this was coincidence. I understood something then, that every time I survived, someone else disappeared. And if there were only supposed to be one of us, then my existence was costing lives. I didn't feel suicidal. I felt accountable. So I decided to stop interrupting death. I recorded messages for the version of me that might remain. I wrote everything down. I covered mirrors so I wouldn't hesitate at the last moment. And when the reflection finally smiled back at me, just a fraction too late, I knew which one of us was going to stay. The last thing I felt wasn't fear. It was relief, like stepping aside so something could finally be whole again. If this worked, the story ends here. And if it didn't, then something else woke up wearing my face. After the third woman died, the world stopped treating me like a miracle. It started treating me like evidence. People didn't say it out loud, but I could see it in the way conversations stopped when I entered rooms, in the way doctors avoided my eyes, in the way officers asked questions they already thought they understood. I wasn't lucky anymore. I was improbable, and improbability makes people nervous. I asked to see her photograph, the woman from the fire, the one they buried with my name. They hesitated, then slid it across the table like they were afraid it might bite. I don't remember breathing when I looked at it. It wasn't just resemblance. It wasn't coincidence. It wasn't genetics or chance or trauma trying to make sense of loss. It was my face. Not almost, not close, mine. Same scar at the edge of the eyebrow. Same slight asymmetry in the mouth. Same tiredness in the eyes, like she'd been carrying something heavy for a long time. For the first time, surviving felt obscene. I started asking a different question after that. Not why this was happening, but which of us was supposed to stop. Therapy didn't help. Every explanation felt like a bandage slapped over a wound that refused to close. When I told them I felt responsible, they said guilt was common among survivors. When I said it felt like I was stealing lives, they said that was trauma speaking. But trauma doesn't leave voicemails from your own phone. Trauma doesn't walk past you in crowds wearing your coat. I started seeing her everywhere. At first I thought it was paranoia, my brain trying to make patterns out of fear. But paranoia doesn't leave footprints. It doesn't show up on security footage. It doesn't write in your journal while you're asleep. I'd walk down the street and feel it. That sensation of being followed by someone who already knows where you're going. I'd turn, expecting to see a stranger, and instead catch a glimpse of myself standing too still, watching too closely. Every time I looked again, she was gone. I stopped trusting mirrors after the bathroom incident. I'd been brushing my teeth, half asleep, when I realized my reflection hadn't lifted its hand yet. Just a fraction of a second behind. Enough to notice. Enough to make my stomach drop. I whispered at it to stop copying me. It smiled. Not wide, not cruel, just patient. That was when I began to understand that this wasn't pursuit. It was replacement. I found missing person reports that could have been my own. Different names, different cities, same face, same posture, same eyes. Some had vanished near water, some in fires, some alone in locked rooms. It felt like someone had been rehearsing me, or like I'd been the rehearsal. Families mistook me for their dead daughters. Strangers told me I looked like someone they lost. Each time it felt like trespassing, like standing inside a life I hadn't earned. I stopped asking if I was being hunted. I started asking if I was the one doing the haunting. The voicemail came on a night when I was too tired to be afraid. I answered without thinking. It was my voice, calmer than mine, certain. It told me I was running out of time. I asked who it was. It said I already knew. After that, I stopped trying to prove I existed. I started trying to figure out why. There was a night I dreamed of my own funeral again. This time, I didn't stand at the back. I walked up to the coffin. I looked inside. She opened her eyes and asked me why I was still here. I woke up crying, not because I was scared, but because I didn't have an answer. That's when the idea stopped feeling terrifying and started feeling necessary. If only one of us was meant to exist, then maybe the problem wasn't death. Maybe the problem was interruption. Once I accepted that possibility, everything became quiet. Not peaceful, just settled, like a decision made long ago finally catching up. I stopped covering mirrors because I didn't need to anymore. I knew she was there. I knew she had always been there, waiting, practicing, learning how to live without hesitation. I stopped hoping I'd survive. I started hoping I wouldn't. I recorded messages for the version of me that might remain, the one who would wake up and keep breathing without guilt. I wrote until my hand shook, until the ink blurred, and I couldn't tell which sentences were mine and which weren't. Some pages begged to live, some begged to stop. I didn't tear either out. On the final night, I sat alone at the table with a glass of water I never drank. I felt lighter than I had in years, like something heavy had finally been set down. When I uncovered the mirror, she was already there, still, calm, whole. She didn't speak. She didn't need to. I understood her better than I'd ever understood myself. She wasn't my enemy. She was my replacement, and I was the mistake that kept lingering. When the phone rang from my own number, I answered without shaking. She told me it was time. I asked if it would hurt. She said not as much as staying, and I believed her. I don't remember falling. I don't remember pain. I remember the sensation of stepping aside, of finally letting something finish, like releasing a breath I'd been holding since the river. If only one of us was meant to exist, I hope it was her. And if you're hearing this now, then maybe it finally worked. Or maybe something else woke up wearing my face.
Madness